I will be bringing on Shaza as my co-host in the second part of R2. Hi, Shaza.
Hello, Peter.
So the organizing team of 24 Hours of UX tries to sort of mimic the same things that you see in the content itself. So we have people from every continent, which makes it a diverse team and allows us to have different thinking patterns, different mindsets, and then bring those all together. And the next presenter will actually be coming to us from New Zealand again. So we have Thea here. Hello, Thea.
Hi, everyone.
How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. How are you?
We're all good. Getting it's afternoon there, right?
Yeah, I'm actually in Singapore at the moment, so it's about 2:30 in the afternoon, which is nice.
All right.
It's about 6:30 home.
I am getting hungry, and you will be talking about a recipe for good design and using the word there not just as a recipe, but literally trying to show similarities between sort of food, cooking, and UX. So it's really good. What I'd like to do before we go on is just to highlight one of our sponsors. So we have several sponsors here that may be that are making the event possible. One of them is Sakai. They are a community for research, education, and practical application of human-computer interactions. So do check them out on sakai.org. And thank you very much for their contribution and their sponsorship. Shaza, any thoughts? Anything to add?
No, it is 2:30 here in Malaysia too, Thea. So we are on the same time zone, and I am equally hungry as Peter. Very excited to hear your talk.
So looking forward to the presentation. And Thea, the chat or the presentation is all yours.
Awesome, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It's awesome to be here and to be a part of this 24 Hours of UX. And it's an absolute honour to be speaking on behalf of the New Zealand UX community and to be on the stage with so many talented people. So who am I? I'm Thea Betts. I'm a design lead at Rome Digital, who specialises in digital transformations for their businesses and their customers. So I've been working in UX for about 10 years now. Outside of the world of design, I love cooking, and actually this topic of this talk has inspired that. So what I'm going to talk about today is the recipe for good design. So today I'm going to share how our passions and curiosity outside of the design world can lead us to be better designers within. Design is everywhere. So whether you're sitting at home binge watching TV, whether you're traveling by a car, train, or plane, whether you're walking through a mall, supermarket, or shop, everything we do has been designed, even cooking. So each time we make dinner, or we bake a cake, or we grab a snack, we're going through that design process. And we're designing what we want to either serve our guests or to eat ourselves. So food has been a common thread throughout my life, whether it's baking something sweet, trialing a new recipe, or making an old favorite. And this was only made more and more part of my life during COVID and during all the lockdowns. So here are a few of my favorite meals that I've made. We've got caramel brownie on the top left, a satay tofu in the middle, black bean nachos, and a Malaya kofta curry on the bottom left. Over time, I've noticed there are more and more similarities between design and cooking. And these lessons that I've learned in the kitchen have shaped me and helped me be the designer who I am today. So with that being said, I'm going to share these parallels, similarities, and lessons with you between the bread and butter of the design process and my love of cooking. So good design is like good food. When cooked to perfection, dinner time is seamless. It's delicious, everyone is happy, and bellies are full. All the ingredients come together in harmony. The flavour balance is just right, and the guests have a delightful dinner experience. But it can be hard to pinpoint exactly what's so good about a meal, and it might be different for everyone. For some, it might be the first bite. For others, it might be that sweet, salty combination or that garnish of coriander at the end. But what we do know is it's a combination of layers which are invisible to most. And it's the coming together of these carefully considered decisions and details and various experiments and the effort and time that we put in to create that dinner. Bad design, on the other hand, is like a bad meal. Take a moment to have a think about the last time you experienced a terrible piece of design. Did you struggle to complete a form? Were you unable to get what you wanted? Or did you end up frustrated or giving up? Now think about the last time you experienced good design. It can be a little bit harder, right? Good design is all around us, but let's unpack what makes good design and good food good. So for me, the design process is similar to a recipe. It's a loose set of instructions with guidelines that you can follow and adapt to create something. And our recipe is traditionally made up of ingredients, the things we use, and a method, a series of steps. So design's a little bit more complicated, so we have a few more steps, but let's get cooking. So to start with, you want to start with the people. Who are the guests? What are their likes or dislikes? How do you know them? Will there be kids? And then we want to layer in the scenario. What is the purpose of the meal? Where will it take place? Next come the constraints. What are the limitations and restrictions we have to work within? How much time or budget do we have? And are there technical restraints? And now that we know all of this, we can start to gather our ingredients. What ingredients do we have on hand to use? Are we missing any? What's the quality like? And are they fresh? Then comes the method. So this is the combination of steps, techniques, and tools to take us from A to B. What techniques do we need to use in order to get the outcomes we want? And what tools do we have to make this happen? And then as we get towards the end of the process, it's all about presentation. What does it look like? And the last part of our recipe, and perhaps the most important, is the end experience for our guests or users. How does it all work together? All right, so starting with the people, whether we're cooking or designing, who is it for? Are we celebrating a child's birthday party? Are we cooking a midweek dinner for the family before we send the kids off to sport? Are we hosting an intimate dinner party with a couple of close friends? Or is it an afternoon barbecue with the extended family? By starting with who, we're able to understand the type of food that our guests would want to eat and why they're coming together for a meal. Is it to socialize, to celebrate, to fuel, or to impress? This same logic applies with our users when we're designing a product. You wouldn't serve a marathon runner a cheese platter before a big race. So why would we create design that wouldn't be in the best interest of our end users? The first step to good design is to understand who we're designing for and what the problem or problems we are trying to solve are. Of course, our solutions will change based on our users and what the problem is, just like when we're cooking dinner. Whether we're designing for online grocery orders, the next fintech or banking generation, traveling in a post-pandemic world, or anything in between, our users come first. So make that first step to ask yourself, who are we designing for and how can we help? Once we know who we're designing for, we need to familiarize ourselves with the setting. Where will they be? And what does that environment look like? When it comes to cooking, this means knowing where the event will take place and how the meal will be served. Are you cooking the meal 3 meters away at the dinner table? Are you preparing the meal now and cooking it on site at a barbecue later? Or are you packing it up in Tupperware and going out for a picnic on the grass? Knowing this helps to inform what we will be creating. So for product design, this is knowing where our users will be engaging and interacting with the solution. Are we designing for someone who's in the comfort of their own home? Or are they at work, out in the field with low internet or all terrain and weather? Or maybe they're in transit on public spaces, only using their mobile devices. Knowing the scenario and setting helps us as designers empathize on the next level with the situation and help to understand how they will be using our solution. Constraints allow us to understand the parameters and limitations we'll need to work within. So scenarios might be one of these, but there's plenty of others too. It might be the time we have to cook dinner or until that project needs to be released. It also might be needs-based. So are our guests vegan? Are they lactose intolerant? And what does the business need? So what are they trying to achieve and what are their goals? Or are the constraints technical? Like what equipment do we have in our kitchens? Or what technology are we working with? So the constraints, while initially overwhelming, might seem difficult and might seem like there are no possibilities. They actually help us enable to be creative within those limitations. So take a recent example of a meal I made for some friends. One of the girls was vegan, another was low FODMAP. So that means no onion, no garlic. I also didn't have an oven at the time in my apartment because we were in Singapore, we'd just moved over, and all we had was an air fryer. So this was a bit of a challenge. It seemed that everything I came up with wasn't going to quite work those limitations. However, when I took a step back, it allowed me to really get creative within those restrictions. And I ended up making this delicious spread of homemade garlic-free hummus, falafels, roasted eggplants, and salad, and it went down a treat. So the lesson here is that this is no different to the constraints that we work with on a daily basis within our product design and design worlds. Every project I've worked with and worked on to date has had some form of constraints. So these could be technical limitations, the business constraints, budgets, or something else. With constraints, we're able to innovate within the lines and create and build something that is more valuable for our end users. As designers, we should embrace these constraints and see them as an opportunity to innovate. After all, a product which never launches isn't a great product, is it? So now that we know who our users are and what our constraints are, we can gather our ingredients. The quality of our ingredients makes a big difference to the meal. Good ingredients equals a good meal. So when we cook with low quality or old wilted spinach, it's going to compromise the end quality of our dish. And so in some cases, it might actually do more harm than good or cause another problem like food poisoning. So to set us up for the best chance of a meal turning out well, we want to make sure that we're using fresh, good quality, and delicious ingredients. And this is no different in the design world, except our ingredients are our information, our insights, and the research that's influencing our end solutions and process. Good quality insights and research is essential to being well informed of this problem space and being able to draw the right assumptions to test as we move throughout. The insights we're using are only valuable if they're quality and trusted. And bad insights can lead to costly mistakes and frustrated clients. Just like throwing out a meal after you discovered it tastes a bit funky because you used expired milk. A good quality insight is not just data or an observation. It needs to articulate the why and help you focus into the right opportunity space. It should be backed up by the research, data, and your customers. So without quality insights, we might solve the wrong problem entirely and end up building a solution that isn't even needed. So what we need to do as designers is take the time to understand those insights, just like you would take the time to choose quality ingredients when you're cooking. All right. So now we're up to the method, and this is the steps we take throughout that process and the techniques we use to create something more than what we had at the beginning. So it's the method that allows the transformation from one state to another. Take a bowl of eggs as an example. We can use different techniques to create various meals or breakfasts from this, depending on what outcome we're looking for. We could poach them in hot water, we could fry them in oil, we could scramble them with milk and butter, we could blend them with flour and milk and get pancakes. These different techniques are a chef's weapon. And our methods and toolkits are ours as well, except they're a little less tasty. We can swap the pots and pans and blenders for post-it notes, pens, and our laptops, but the theory's the same. The methods, workshops, and toolkits are a step-by-step guide that help us unleash creativity throughout the design process. So what are these tools? And I'm sure we're all familiar with the 5 stages of the design process, but at any stage of this, we have our well-known toolkits we can pull from. If we're at the beginning, that might be empathy interviews, proto-personas, or journey mapping. And then as we move through to defining our solutions, it might be impact mapping. And then when we need to ideate, we can use crazy eights and sketch stormings to get those ideas flowing and creative juices going. And then we can bring those to life with our wireframing, prototyping, before we test those with our users or do a design critique. So at each stage of this process, we have different tools, methods, and workshops that we can call upon. And this gives us the framework to be flexible within our process. And we can use our toolkits as we need them to ensure that we're getting the right outcomes at the right stages. And here we are, presentation. So the final presentation of a meal and what we serve to our guests is similar to the look and feel of the products that we ship. And while we're cooking, we're thinking about presentation, and it's always in the back of our mind. It's not until we get towards the end of the process when we start putting a bit more attention on this, the UI, the micro animations, and the branding. So it makes the initial difference for someone engaging with your product. But just like a good meal, first impressions are only important if either the meal's tasty or if the product's actually working how it should. Which brings us to our most important element here, experience. So the final dish we serve is a bit like our go live solutions. It's easy to dress up, to take nice product shots, or to have a beautiful website. But if that experience layer isn't there, we won't see the uptake of the platform that we would have hoped and expected. Our ideas will not have the same impact we wanted, and they might cause more frustration than solving the problem at hand. So this experience layer is similar to the taste of a dish. It's not something that can be seen. It's an invisible layer that can be the difference between, well, a good and a bad meal. So let's take an example. You're at a dinner party, you're having a great time, it's good music, good people, and then dinner's served. And it looks great, but you take that first bite and it's not that nice. What do you do? If you're really hungry, you might continue to eat it, struggling as you go. If you're being polite, you might try eat a little, seeing if it'll get any better. Alternatively, if you're really not in the mood and it's not for you, you're probably not going back for a second bite at all. So design is exactly the same, except instead of taste, it's all about how it works. I've been excited by an app or product in the past. That value prop sounds great, the design looks awesome, but then once you start to use it, I'm frustrated and I'm not able to get past the 3rd or 4th screen. So in most cases, you might stop here, you might put down the app in frustration. And this means that the brand has lost a potential user and potentially some negative press going forward. And in some cases, you might suffer through. For an example, if you're at an airport checking into your flight, you're probably going to continue to go through that process no matter how hard it is to get on your holiday. and you won't enjoy it, and if possible, you'd book with someone else next time. So as Steve Jobs said, design is not what it looks like or how it feels, but how it works. And the experience layer may be invisible to the eye, but it ties everything that's been done up until now together to make good design good. So when we're cooking, a chef will constantly taste their dish, and they'll test it before they serve it to their guests as well. What they're doing at this stage is they're testing to check that their assumptions are correct and to make sure that they know what they're serving is actually good. Are the flavors working as they imagined? Does it taste good? Is anything missing? And if we don't taste our cooking as we go, we're just guessing and hoping for the best. Design is really no different. Like taste testing our dinners, testing our solutions is important. It should not only be done as a checkbox at the end of the process, but constantly, just like when we're cooking. We need to make sure that we're on the right track, that our insights are fresh, that everything is seasoned and working as expected. And then when we test, we get immediate feedback on what we've done, which then influences our next iteration of ideas and solutions. Sometimes that feedback might be small. Maybe it just needs a little salt, or maybe the language isn't quite right. Other times, a core ingredient might be missing or an important feature set. Then we're back into the making, prototyping, and adjusting our meals or products to repeat this all over again. Testing is a critical part to getting the experience just right. It needs to be something that we bake in to our design process to do frequently and constantly. And when we do get the design seasoned perfectly, it just works. It's a win for the business, and it's a win for our end users, and it's a win for us. When we focus on the experience and create a feedback and testing loop, we're able to build products that are usable, solve a problem, and provide a great experience. So far, this is the recipe for good design that we've covered. From understanding the people, the context, defining the constraints and ingredients, and then ideating solutions, crafting up our methods, plating up, and the end experience. And as we go through this process multiple times, we learn from our mistakes, we become experienced in new techniques, and we know how to test and adjust while we're doing. But the last layer in the recipe for good design is yourself. The experience and knowledge which we learn through practicing becomes almost more valuable than the initial recipe we started with. Whether designing or cooking, it's your personal knowledge that you bring alongside your life experiences that really take you to that next level. So everyone can follow on instructions and hope for the best. But just like design and cooking, it's more than following the instructions. When you're a beginner, you might follow the recipe with exact measurements, pouring out that exact quarter cup, timing everything to a T. You're hoping for the best and you don't 100% understand what you're doing, but you are doing it yourself. And this is much like in design, when you're starting with out-of-the-box workshops, methods, and templates. And then as you level up, you start to understand what's happening. And you start to personalize and put your own spin on the process. You're expanding your toolkit with your own unique ways and techniques. Just like with ravioli, as a home cook, you might trade up your packet meal to make your own pasta, filling, or even sauce from scratch. And then we hone our skills perfectly, our methods, we become master chefs. We allow ourselves to go off script, to be more creative, and to adapt the process as we get the outcomes we want. This intuition is what really makes a good cook and a good designer. It's learning how to bend the rules and challenge the existing patterns. It's understanding what techniques there are and when's best to use them. It's using intuition to pause and to find the answers when you're not sure on what you're doing. And then on top of all of this designer intuition and knowledge, we can also layer in our personal and life experiences. So what we do every day defines us as a person and as a designer. And these experiences inspire us and help us challenge our thinking. So because of that trip to Thailand or that move overseas, you might approach a problem that you're solving today in a completely different way. And you might call on this experience to influence your designs back home. Or because of that friend you had who recently broke their arm, or someone that you've met that's in a wheelchair, you might design with accessibility in mind more than you would have previously. So now an example. So I'm sure we're all familiar with Uber, the transportation app which allows you to get from A to B. They started in the US, but they have a presence globally. Although surprisingly, it's not known as Uber everywhere. They acquired Careem in 2020, which is their Dubai, Middle Eastern-based platform, and then Grab, which is their Southeast Asia in 2018. So these three apps have similar core functionalities, the ability to order a ride. However, the feature sets, the UX flows, the visual treatments are all unique and take into consideration the nuances of each culture. So in Singapore and Dubai, where super apps are king, the ride-sharing apps reflect this. From one app, you can do many things, most of which have absolutely nothing to do with transport itself. You can order an at-home manicure, pay your internet bill, shop for clothing or food. And you can even book an at-home PCR test, which is a little bit different to how it's done in other regions like New Zealand. So in New Zealand, super apps are not that common and people aren't accustomed to them. So what we have is we have an app for transport and a second app for food delivery. So our experiences and the experiences across cultures, countries, and people is what helps us create solutions that work best for the environments we're designing for. So as designers, we cannot simply copy and paste and expect it to work. Instead, we need to be sponges, soaking up those experiences, the culture, the different perspectives, and being inspired to bring it back to our daily work and the problems we're solving. Inspiration and experience is all around us. It's the people we meet, it's the places we travel, it's the products and spaces we use every day, it's the menus we read and the meals we eat. But why cooking? So for me, cooking is all about the process. It's about challenging myself to be creative, and it's the reward of that experiment paying off after a final meal. And it was easy for me to see parallels between cooking and design. Plus, everyone loves a good food metaphor. So much like how I see learnings in food, there are parallels we can draw and learn from our everyday lives. So I want to leave this with you. What parallels can you draw between your personal life and design? And how will it help you become a better designer? Is it through travel, through DIY, through gaming, parenting, or something else entirely? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thea.
Awesome. Thank you, Thea.
Right on time.
Thanks, guys.
So you can't be stretching. It's getting ready for the next couple of hours.
So Thea, will you be heading over to your Q&A session to take any questions from the audience?
Yes, I can jump on. Just give me a few minutes to organize that.
The session and just search out your own topic and then join in there. And there you can also actually bring people onto the stage so that you can have a more inclusive dialogue.